Oh, there it goes. And we're rolling. I am here with Congressman Burgess Owen, who I have known for several years and who I consider a friend. I've met him in person. We've worked on the same cause
Oh,
together.
oh, there it
And
goes.
then I have also joined by a Utahan. Is that correct? A Utahan?
You just nailed it. You just nailed it.
Dr. Laura Sanger, who a lot of the people in my subscription base are very familiar with, and they just love Dr. Laura. She's just an awesome human, and she does a lot of work in soul mapping. And I told her about you, and so I thought, how cool we could have your constituent there. We can ask him questions. The reason I reached out to you is because I saw on your Twitter you were really hammering on human trafficking. And so I wanted to get some, thoughts on you. And I just want to go straight to you as soon as possible. Don't want to waste time. Tell us what's going on. I know you actually are one of the politicians that went to the border.
Absolutely. No, this is a tragedy, a human tragedy in so many different ways. And it's been a slow moving process. It's not, now we're beginning to, the rest of the country is beginning to see a little bit more of it now that the Martha's Vineyard folks are seeing what's happening with that. But this has been going on throughout the entire year. And I had a chance to go down actually to the Darien Gap to see just how, and this is down at the southern border of Panama, and to see just how that flow of humans, of people coming through without any types of processing, how this overwhelms this small indigenous community that was down at the time. This is something we're going to be dealing with quite a while, because it's not just the fentanyl that's come across, but it's the idea that we're allowing human trafficking. You're allowing the cartel to take advantage of women and children. Just the human tragedy that we're going to start seeing this over the next coming years, and it's very predictable. I'll just say this: we fought this war of slavery 200 years ago. I thought that as a country we had addressed it, we moved forward, and now we have an administration that literally is allowing it to happen every single day. We're looking at people who are given the promises of coming to America. And have no idea the price they're going to pay as they get here, as women are being raped and children are being raped. I mean, it is tragic, it's evil, and to see it happening here in 2022 and not getting the press, the exposure, is truly a tragedy for our culture, to be honest with you. So I'm glad that we're having these kind of conversations. This is just one little piece of it, the human part of it. The fact that we're also having fentanyl. We lost 100,000 Americans last year with this remarkably dangerous drug, and again, nothing's been said about it. So we're going to start to really focus a little bit more as we get into a new Congress, to say the least.
So one of the things that I've learned in the last year and a half, because I've interviewed a lot of people that are out of satanic ritual abuse and out of human trafficking, for different levels and types of backgrounds. But one of the things that I've learned, and I just would love for you to verify and tell me, are the congressmen and women and the other politicians aware of this, either in your state or nationally, that it not only becomes somebody that they rape, and they pay for, so they make money from them, but then there's also the aspect of breeding them within their communities and bringing in more to abuse. Then there's whisperings of, human organ selling. There's
Harvesting.
whispering of cannibalism, all kinds. I mean, when you get to evil, you're with evil. And so how well versed are you guys on this as far as politically, and what are you guys doing about that?
Well, I'm not sure about some of the nuances you're talking about. That just keep this in mind. As once you start looking at people as property, as strictly profit center, there's no bounds of where it might go. And it's the idea of human harvesting. I've heard about that also. The fact that children can be used in this way, that is the depth of evil. When you can actually be okay with the most innocent, those who are not protected, those are being abused in every single way possible. And again, it's a matter of power. When you have evil that has power, there's no limitation where that can go. So I think that the sad part is that we're now here in 2022, and these things are happening, and we know it's happening. We know there's a border that's wide open, that there's billions of dollars being made literally from a cartel using humans in so many different ways, whether it be to get to make sure that they can allow drugs to come in one way while they're using the trafficking of humans in one direction. These are things that, again, we have to make sure we're addressing. If we're ever going to really hold on to the culture we have here, which is one has always valued life, this is one area we have to address. And those who are not handling it, not addressing it, we have to hold them accountable also. And that's something that will happen as we get into, again, a new Congress that is aware of these issues and really taking advantage of having oversight to bring this to the attention of American people.
You know, Congressman Owens, I had a question related to that. You know, it was brought to my attention back in May of 2021 that you, along with a lot of other congressional leaders, signed a letter that was sent to the Department of Homeland Security. And you were bringing up these issues in that, you know, your concern was for these migrant children that are coming across the border. Are they being impacted by human trafficking? And I'm just curious, did the Department of Homeland Security address your concerns in that letter that was sent?
No, and here's the problem we're having with the hard left. You know, I think the key is understanding where we are as a society at a very, very important inflection point. You know, we are a nation that has moved forward, has led in the concepts of freedom because we believe in faith, family, free market education. That's who we are. And we believe in meritocracy, we believe in fairness, all those things. We believe in the value of life. Those are the things that's made our country so unique. Rule of law. We have an administration that does not care about any of the things I just mentioned a minute ago. Rule of law, the fact that we have an open border, the fact that people are coming in literally just flowing through and no way of tracking. They come in and they're put on planes and shipped off someplace around the country. Nobody knows where they are. This is an administration that we have never experienced this type of, this type of not really respecting at all anything that we've stood for as a country. It's been nothing like it. So yeah, we're sending letters. Keep in mind though, as a minority, there's but so much you can do. We don't right. control the gavel. We don't control oversight. We don't control the testimonies. We actually don't even control what hits the floor. That happens. Once that happens, and the American people begin to speak up, which I think is going to happen this November. We're going to see what oversight looks like. We're going to see what accountability looks like. And I'm looking forward to that process in a big way because American people deserve to have leading us back to what we have always believed in: rule of law and fairness.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so I was talking to one of your team members earlier, and he was mentioning that you have a new initiative out called Just Win Baby. Can you share about that? Because it sounds like it could help with this November cycle.
It's actually changed it to Dream Big PAC, the Dream Big PAC. And it's actually, in a sense, what my dream has always been. I've always felt I'm a person who's never thought that politics would be part of my journey. Never considered it. But I've always believed in our country. I was fortunate to be raised at a time where there was patriotism in my community. I believed the meritocracy was the way that we commanded respect, and those conservative values that I was raised in. I've always believed that if we ever came back to that as a community, whether it be Black and Hispanic, we come back to our core values of what made us the community we were, then we can, in essence, pull our country back because the left needs our vote. They're addicts to the votes of minorities who believed in them. And so the Dream Big PAC are basically minorities, folks that are remarkably successful, very strong, pro-American, proud American first voices, Black, Hispanic, women, veterans, business owners. And we're seeing this. We believe in the American way, and we believe that we can be the voices for those who have not been heard, those who want to believe once again in the American way. And this is a time in which a lot of people begin to ask themselves those questions. What is true? We've been taking for granted that if we just voted for Democrats, they would just lead us to the promised land. It's not going that direction. Misery is in those places where they control. So this is just the beginning of a movement that we're going to start to see diversity of America come into the Republican Party because we realize this is the party of freedom. And I'm just thankful that I'm in a position at this point to highlight some remarkably successful Americans. We bring them across the line with us in November. And this is what the people out there, I'm hoping those that are listening, take part in this. We want to make sure that when November comes, we have believed that we've done everything we could. We're exhausted because we put everything on the field. If we do that right, November will have a totally different narrative in terms of who the Republican Party is, what we stand for, and what the other side has been doing to us all these years. And we're going to start winning in a big way, and I look forward to that process.
Can you share with us a few of the people that you are supporting?
Absolutely. And I have a list of them in front of me. Thanks for that.
Please do. And then after this, I'm going to let Laura ask some questions.
Okay. And yeah, go to Dream Big PAC. Many of these, some of these you've already heard about. You know about John James, for instance, who ran for Senate last year. He's going to be, no question, going to be one of our companions next year. Anna Paula Luna, that's she's actually in Florida, and she's also going to be doing okay. April Becker down in Vegas, remarkable young lady. Kathlena, if you go to this, Kathlena Loft, Cassie Garcia, Rod Dolores, Tamika Hamilton up in California, Jennifer Ruth Green, Monica De La Cruz, who actually we expect some great things. So these are folks down in Texas, and this is what's exciting about the Texas Hispanic women that are running. This has not happened in over 100 years, where the Hispanic community are realizing that they need a new voice, one that listens to them, one that's trying to find answers. And this is what I'm excited about, as same with Jennifer Ruth Green up in Illinois. These are voices that people are hearing, and it's making sense, and we're going to make a difference as we go across. But again, Dream Big PAC, all these are listed there. You see the pictures, the background, very impressive group of folks, to say the least.
It's encouraging to hear. I thought of one more question before Laura goes. Do you interact ever with sheriffs or any of the people in the policing world in Utah?
Absolutely. It's interesting. It's just with a group of sheriffs this morning. We're doing something here that I think, and we lead in so many different ways in so many different of our areas that we take part in. But the sheriffs, I had an event today, they do it twice a year, where teachers come out to the shooting range so they can get a chance to truly understand different situations. And there's an amazing process where you can see where active shooters will be in a school system or whatever, and they can set up these test runs. So I had a chance to go out and experience that with them. What we have right now is we have a rebound of respect for that particular profession. Thank goodness. Our people, the American people, are seeing what it is to reimagine, quote, reimagine and defund the police and all that craziness from the left. That at the end of the day, when that happens, not only there's a break of respect and trust in the people and the police, but then there's crimes that go up like we're now experiencing across the country. Yeah. So that rebound, that we're coming back, the pendulum swinging back to where we understand we have to respect our law enforcement. And if we do that, we give them the praise they deserve, we give them the respect they deserve, and it's a place where people can come, the best can come and feel as a place that they can be respected and paid well. Then we're going to be doing very well in that area. So I look forward to that happening as we continue to move forward.
Thank you.
My turn?
Yeah, go girl.
Well, I think back to the trafficking issue that we were talking about. I'm just wondering if here in Utah, are you seeing any sort of gaps in continuum of care or even access to care for those that are coming out of human trafficking?
Laura, that's a good question. And I'll say this about Utah. I'm very, very proud of the way that we collaborate. We collaborate very well between state, federal, and we have private industries. And there's a number of different programs that those here in Utah are familiar with that actually, Malof is one of them. I'll think of another one in the next few minutes. But the fact is, there's a couple factors that we have to really address here in Utah. One is we have this environment in which we kind of sometimes take things for granted, that we're We love our kids. We see it. We kind of trust the environment we're in. We have no idea that things like this is capable.
Right.
And that's what the other side takes advantage of. They love to take advantage of innocence. And so we have to make sure we're engaging ourselves, educating ourselves. Well, that was one of my platforms, by the way, when I first ran, is doing something in this particular environment. One of the things we have done is put about we have a couple $100,000 into hotel and to making sure when people come out of this environment, when they're brought out of it, that they have a place to stay, a place of safety, that they can begin to get traction again. And then there's a lot of other some resources here that actually, again, allow those who have been trafficked to start anew, to get a second chance. We're doing things in Congress in which we can expunge the records of those who've been pushed into this. They might have done some things that are nonviolent, that they don't have to carry that record with them. They can really start anew. So there's a lot of things involved with this process. Just getting the help, the therapy that they need to go through. There's so many areas, but now that we're aware of it, we can address it. Again, we just have to make sure we slow down the funnel. We have to stop this process at the border that makes it even tougher to deal with those we have, because we have so much resources. And if we continue to raise this process, we're bringing more and more people into trafficking. It just makes it tougher to deal with the numbers we already have that we have to work through with.
Yeah, it's interesting. You mentioned the Maloof Foundation. I actually, a friend of mine sent me a link to the Safe House Project and the Maloof Foundation. And so I went to the Safe House Project, and they actually, speaking about educating and becoming aware, they put together a 10-module training. It's online and it's free. It's called On Watch. And I did that training this week because, just like you said, there's people in our community that we have no idea that they're being trafficked. Our kids' friends could be trafficked by their family. And so the Safe House Project and the Maloof Foundation, they partnered together to bring this education. And I have to say, it was incredibly well done. It only took me an hour and 15 minutes to do all 10 modules, and it's free. And I think, back to your point of one of the things that we have to do is raise awareness in our communities. This is an excellent way for people just to jump online, take a little bit of time out of their schedule and do the 10 modules. Because, for me, I've only been really trying to educate myself in this area of human trafficking and satanic ritual abuse for about the last 6 months. So I feel like I am new in this. But I want to become literate in human trafficking and understand all the different nuances, so that when I'm in a community, I'm also a psychologist. And so when I'm in a community, being very observant, very aware of, interactions between people, that sort of thing. And so anyways, just to sing the praises of the Maloof Foundation, which, like you said, it's a local Utah foundation that's really doing excellent work to bring forth awareness.
And Laura, that's just one of many. That's what I love about Utah. We have a very service-oriented culture. We want to find solutions. We're innovative, and we have good hearts. And so we can find the solutions as long as we are aware. And that's a very good point, because again, we kind of live in this bubble. Most of us in this bubble around the country, particularly in areas where you kind of feel safe already. You kind of, things are predictable, and you just don't see anything like that ever happening to us. Well, when it happens, it's a shocker, but it is happening. And so unfortunately, so many times it happens without many people knowing about it. But at the end of the day, we have to become aware. I talked to my daughter, Summer, who used to be a flight attendant. And this is one area that she's also very much involved with. And she mentioned that she looks back years and years ago, and now that she's aware of what trafficked people look like, she said, Dad, I remember this young man on the plane, and looking at him and some of the signs that she was aware of, I think he was being trafficked. And that's another point. It's not women. It's just not women. It's not. It's kids. It's boys and girls. They're actually moms in a society that have been caught up into this process that you would never ever believe that is actually caught up. So there's so many facets to this. The most important thing is that we become aware, and that we have to stand up for it. We cannot allow just to become numb to what's happening at the border and think it's going to be okay, because that's a cancer to our soul. if we do not stand up for those who are that are very innocent, cannot defend themselves, and being used and abused by those who for profit and power. And what right now, to be honest with you, I cannot see any other reason for them to be so quiet at the border than power. There's something that's going on with the hard left, that they can care less about people, that they see a benefit, that this flush of people coming through that some kind of way will one day give them the power to do other things because of the hopelessness and the I guess the hopelessness. When you have a party that's focused and moves forward because of misery, it's something wrong about that. So we have to, those of us who are listening to this process, take the time to become aware. Know that outside of our little bubble that we can feel comfortable in, there's a lot of pain and misery, and eventually it's going to show up on our doorsteps if we're not careful to work and extend ourselves to make sure we stop this. So it is truly an evil process. It's slavery at its worst. It's happening here in 2022. We don't ever have to look back and look at how bad our country was 200 years ago. We handled that 200 years ago with the death of 600,000 Americans fighting that war. We have it on our doorsteps today. We have to do something about it. So let's become aware and do what we can to make sure we're stopping it.
Yeah, that's good. So being a congressman, it's over a year now, or just at a year?
It's going on 2 years, believe it or not. It's crazy.
Oh my gosh, yes. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, 2 years. I personally, watching you, have been kind of amazed at the scope and sequence, like how big the scope is and the order that you have to do things in. Did it take you by surprise how much you had to cover, how much you had to know, how much you have to be versed with?
Well, you know what it is? I think the biggest part of this process is finding what your mission is. I was really blessed, again, for someone who never ever thought politics would be a part of my journey. I did know once I made a decision, a part of it was Carmen, as you know, I was working with at-risk kids. And one of the things that I realized at some point is that we're not gonna help these kids, we don't change our policies in DC. So that was a part of it. And knowing that education was something that I was around when I was raised, my dad, my mom, to see how far we've come in a negative way to a race that was literally leading our country in the growth of middle class and men matriculating from college to where we are today. I knew education was going to be part of it. So part of this process is know where your wheelhouse. What is it that you care about? Education was it. The first question I asked about this committee, does it deal with juveniles? Is that a part of the oversight? And the answer was yes. So it became very easy for me to know what I want to do there. My goal really, at the end of the day, is as this year is going on, is become an expert in this area, to be an expert and making sure that every child has an opportunity to be educated. That once this process begins, then families are beginning to build families up again, because there's the process of feeling comfortable, confident about yourself. So I think that's to answer your question. I think everybody comes to this profession with something they really care about. Education is my number one. Now that I'm in Utah, what I'm really caring about, and the growth of our state, transportation and infrastructure will be the next one that we're getting part of. And that will be helping the businesses to grow. So it is a lot. I think the best thing that happened to me is to have a remarkable team. I am truly blessed that I can come into this environment and be educated, be able to have an input to produce, because I have this remarkable team that keeps me up to date, keeps me on pace, and allows me to prioritize those things that's important to me. So that's a big piece of it, and I'm fortunate to have that in place here, to say the least.
I think, education is one of the reasons why I voted for you, because, I was listening to you before the elections, and you were talking about the indoctrination that was happening in our schools. And first of all, I was thrilled that you were aware of that. And, since you've been in office, I've seen you, bring forth legislation and co-sponsor bills, trying to be, have this transparency with critical race theory and, stopping the indoctrination of our children. And I actually had a question for you about Title IX, because one of the things that I was made aware of recently, just by one of the local groups here in Utah, is that I think it was July 12th of this year, the U.S. Department of Education, they published this notice on the Federal Register, essentially notifying us that they were going to change the regulations for Title IX, and that would expand the scope to include discrimination essentially based on sexual orientation.
Right.
And so they're really wanting to change how sexual discrimination is defined. And they're wanting it to include, anyone that is prevented from school activities based on gender identity would be considered sex discrimination. And so when I realized that, I'm like, my goodness, they're flat out ignoring the biological definition of sex. And so this presents all sorts of problems, one of which, of course, is it would rob girls of their safe space at school. So here you would have, boys that identify as girls could go into girls' bathrooms, girls' locker rooms, even if there's overnight lodging, for like a field trip, for example. Yeah. Boys that identify as girls could be placed in rooms with girls, which is completely inappropriate. But even beyond that, I was an athlete from the age of 6 all the way through to college, and realizing that tragically under the banner of Title IX, with these new regulations, sports teams would be based upon gender identity and not biological sex. Yeah. And, we're already seeing that, with boys competing, biological boys competing against girls. But even more concerning, I think, for me as a parent, is some of these new regulations are essentially really threatening our parental rights, because it's requiring K through 12 schools to support children in their gender transition without requiring parental consent.
Yeah.
And my understanding is this was all done without congressional approval. So I'm just wondering what can be done to prevent these changes from going through on Title IX.
Laura, that is you're just so spot on. And I guess let me just say that what we're fighting against, this is what America needs to understand. This is a spiritual war. We built our nation on Judeo-Christian values. We built our nation on the fact that God has roles for all of us. I tell you, as a young man, it made it very easy for me to know what my responsibilities were, to be respected, to make sure my mom and dad were proud of me, and that's to love God, country, family, respect women and authority. It was always the idea that men, our goal very simply, we had just one basic thought process: to provide, protect, and partner with women, period. And to allow womanhood, which is the greatest gift that our country has. That's where our kids are raised. That's where the values are placed. That's where men understand what it is to want to protect and sacrifice, because this is really our role. Well, we have another side of this. We have Marxism and socialism. We have to call it for what it is. Mm-hmm. And these guys are like little termites. They've been after us for a long time. They undermine every institution that makes our country what it is. And the worst thing they can do is start to demean women and men, to have young boys who think that it is no shame to go out and, because they're stronger, they're built bigger, have no shame to think that competing as women is nothing wrong with that. There's something very wrong with that mindset that we get to that point. So a couple of things you just mentioned. Number one, this is not done through legislation. It's been done through we call it the deep state, the swamp. We have people in these agencies that we have no idea who they are, but they are truly making laws and directing the path of our country through things we just mentioned a minute ago. These are things now. Here's the upside, and I like people to realize. First, I'm an eternal optimist, because I truly believe that our country was placed here for a reason. The idea of freedom resonates who we are, and sometimes we have to go through contrast to know that we have to fight for it a little bit. But I have never been more excited, because we're having a conversation like this, Laura. Think about it. This has been going on for a long time, this whole deep state. It's been, literally decades. But we're now talking about it because the curtain's been pulled back. Our women have been under attack for a long time. Our young boys, I'm going to talk the education process. Just imagine this, back in 2017, there's a study that said 75% of Black boys in the state of California could not pass standard reading and writing tests. Now, what does that equate to now? Why should we be surprised in 2022 that we have gangs all over the place? young men who have no idea what respect for life or respect for family is all about. They have no, I mean, the concept of how much damage and misery they can bring is, they kind of look at it as a badge of courage. Well, if we look back at 2017 and see that they cannot read and write, of course, they're not going to know how to move forward. So a couple of things. We now are aware. We're now talking. This is one thing that no matter what side of the aisle we're sitting on, Republican, Independent, Democrats, we're saying we want our country back. And because of that, we bring people into office. This is what our process is all about, who reflect our values. I will say this. I think over the last 4 years, Americans have been shifting away from the elitist crowd that's been here in Congress for so long. Those who've been around for a while, we vote for them, we bring them in place, and we just get so frustrated, nothing happens. Those days are gone. We're now, the American people are saying, we want people that are pro-America first, that have the boldness to say, I'm proud to be who I am. I'm not going to sit back and apologize. If I see something like a boy competing against a girl, I'm going to call it out for what it is. Yeah. We're creating whiners, wieners, and wimps. That's what we're creating, men. And we cannot afford to do that. And I'll say this too, it's so important to recognize men who stand by and let this happen to our ladies, our women, our daughters, they're nothing but cowards. We have to understand that we are truly devaluing our culture when we do not elevate the best in men and women, what we do as partners. So we have to get back to that, and that's what's happening. I know this is a long answer to a short question, but my point is, help is on the way, and it's going to be cemented in by what we the people do in November. So let me say this: every one of us have to do our part, educating ourselves, having these kind of conversations. That's just one piece of it. What I'm doing is one piece of it. With American people out there that actually are engaging, going out to vote, educating themselves, that's the part that truly brings us across the line. We the people doing our part. Mm-hmm. So I'm excited about November. The gift of Biden is that they brought so much misery to all of us that they cannot hide behind lies anymore. We see it, we feel it every single day. Yeah. So having these conversations, Carmen, that we're having right now, when people understand how much misery has been given to people, not only here, but those that are coming through, we're gonna look at this administration and realize it was the worst that could have ever happened to our country. It is the absolute opposite of what our founders put in place as a place of life living in pursuit of happiness. This is nothing like it, and they're gonna pay a price, because American people, once we get it, we get it, and we're going to come back at them really strongly, and I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah, well, it's also very nice for congressmen like you to take some time to get on these smaller platforms and share what you're doing. I know that you're up against a clock. Jesse gave me a time limit. So my last question is, how can we help you, and how do people reach you? And you've got Dr. Laura here in your town, so I'm sure that she can help you as well.
Well, first of all, Laura, thank you so much for joining on. Mm-hmm. I'll say this: one of the things that my team does, we love to serve. My love language is service. For those who read the book, The 5 Love Languages, service, and I love to hustle, and that's reflective with my team. So, Laura, if there's anything we can do, anything that you would like to get information to us or get feedback, we want to be educated as much as we can. The more we're educated, the more we can look at legislation that can help Utah and the rest of our country in the process. DreamBigPac.com. Go there and see this remarkable group of Americans that I'm supporting. This will be, by the way, my legacy, my mission. As long as I'm in Congress, my goal is to expand our base of minorities across the board, Polynesian, Asians, across the board, because our party reflects America, the best of America. So anybody can go there and help out as much as we can. We want to make sure we bring these guys across, and then we'll do the same again in another 2 years in 2024 to really show again what our country is all about. So, and by the way, it's platforms like this, Carmen, that really make the difference. We all do our part. Can I leave you one last story before we let you go? Okay. Okay. I'm gonna leave you with a little football story. All right.
Okay.
But though I played with the Raiders back in the days when the Raiders just win all the time. And there was a time that the Raiders were pretty good consistently. And the team that I played with, the year that we went Super Bowl, we were underdogs. We were not supposed to win. We were just rebuilding. but there was about 11 of us that came in at the same time from different teams. And we all had this one thing in common. We're so sick and tired of losing, and we're coming to a culture that Al Davis has put aside that we're just so excited about being part of. So the goal was basically everyone did their part. No matter what the time we spent on the field, it was everything that we left everything on the field. One of the guys I played with was Ray Guy. Ray was a punter. He might have come in 3 times a game, but he would kick from our 10-yard line to their 10-yard line and change the game overnight. And then you have some guys who come in, they play every single play. The goal was, though, whatever time you were on that field, you had nothing left when you left. Well, what's happening right now across our country is Americans are doing the same thing. We're coming out of the stands, we're coming off the sideline. We're saying, okay, I've been busy, I've been doing my thing, I've been building my dreams. What can I do to save my country? We're thinking of the same way, all of us. We're getting on school boards meetings. We're having conversations like this. We're being nice to those who don't quite understand, because we can bring them aboard if we just be nice and be patient. We're doing our part. And I tell you, if America does what I know we can do, we're going to change this thing. We're going to turn our country around. The slow drift to the left, to destruction, to the edge that we've been going on for the last decades, we're going to turn it around. We're going to come back to freedom, and America coming back to what we really are best at doing. So just hang in there, do everything. Everybody's listening, do your part, be exhausted in November, know that you put everything out there, and we'll come back in a big way for sure.
That's a great way to end. Thank you so much for coming. And Dr. Laura and I are going to continue on without you, but we really do appreciate you so much.
Thank you, guys. Carmen, good seeing you again. And
right,
Laura, thank you so much. Reach out to us, Laura, okay? Look forward to it.
I will, for sure. Thank you.
Okay, take care, guys. All the best.
Bye-bye. Yay, that was really fun. I'm so glad that it finally happened. Dr. Laura and I have been trying to coordinate this for a couple of weeks. We almost didn't make it because he said he only had 25 minutes, but he actually stayed longer than he thought, so that was nice. But yeah, any wrap-up comments? I feel like we can do our own views on it. What are you thinking?
Yeah, well, I liked what he was saying at the end, especially that we all have a part to play. And, kind of back to what I was saying earlier about this, online modules trying to educate us about the signs of what someone being trafficked, what that looks like. I think that is the easiest place for all of us to start with. Like I said, it's free. You just go to safehouseproject.org, and you can watch their online, training and really educate yourself. Because one of the things that really shocked me is that only 1% of those that are sex trafficked are ever identified as being trafficked. And 40% of those are being trafficked by their families. And so here we have, people probably in our neighborhoods that are being trafficked. And if we don't understand, what the signs are, then we can't do anything about it. And, even beyond that, what they were sharing in this online training is that 45% of those people that are sex trafficked will attempt suicide. And so that's why it just really hit me that, first of all, I've been unaware because I didn't know what the signs were. And that second, I didn't realize I knew families are broken, but I didn't realize that 40% of people being trafficked are being trafficked by their families. Yeah. So I think just going back to what Congressman Owens was saying, and that is we each have a role to play. Mm-hmm. I certainly think getting out and voting in November is something we all should do. I know so many of us are frustrated with the voting system. Does it even count? But we have to do our part. And if we flood the system with our votes, it won't be able to handle. And so I think just as Congressman Owens said, we have to get out there and vote as well in November. So.
And I think too, what you gave, you're such a great human. You're such a great example. You're like this exemplary student. I just threw my pen across the room. But seriously, you're so you don't just think about these things. You actually dig in and do them. And I had never thought about taking a class. I feel like I have enough information. I've been working with these girls. I did know that most of the girls come, or at least the ones that I've encountered, were because of their families. They were sold by their own mothers sometimes, which, you know, the uncles or the stepfathers, you kind of go, okay, I get that a little bit, but the mother, you know, but when somebody's drug addicted, and this goes back to what he was saying, is this is a spiritual problem. And
Right.
and you know, think about this. You're an actual therapist. You'd think of anyone, you would recognize the signs, right?
Right.
But if
Right.
you're not trained
Mhm.
to know them,
Mhm.
how would you? And is that something you guys even discuss in school?
Not when I went through school. Now I went through graduate school about 30 years, well, 26 years ago.
Yeah.
Um, so I wonder if they do now, but it certainly is important. And even understanding trauma-informed counseling, you know, that's something definitely that I think clinicians now are getting trained in, because how do you help these people that are coming out of such horrific, abusive situations? And there's, you know, there's so many different angles. And I'm also, it's one of those things, Carmen, I have to say thank you, first of all, because you are actually the conduit that got me involved in this stuff. Because, you know, in one of our interviews that we did, I've mentioned this to you before, but someone reached out to me that is coming out of satanic ritual abuse. And just in her reaching out to me, we've developed this beautiful friendship. And
Awesome.
I had no concept that this was the path the Lord was going to lead me down. And, you know, when we just say yes to the Lord and we put one foot in front of the other, it's a wild adventure. But I'm so grateful because not only do I have this new friendship, and the Lord is just teaching us how to be with one another. I mean, she's coming out of the royal bloodline, and so the level of satanic ritual abuse is really unfathomable. And I feel like I only understand, you know, a fraction of what she's gone through, but she's teaching me so much. And what's amazing about her is that she has this beautiful relationship with Adonai. And the Holy Spirit has just been walking her through this process. Well, so in connecting with her, that has opened doors for me to understand. But then even locally, like the Lord just keeps bringing people in my path, kind of like you, that are either coming out of satanic ritual abuse, or you know, I'm meeting people that are actually ministering to people coming out of human trafficking and satanic ritual abuse. So I'm reading this book. This is another thing that people can read. It's is this backwards for you guys? It's
I can
backwards
see
for
it.
me.
It's probably backwards for you, but I can see
Oh,
it.
okay. Ending Human Trafficking. And it's essentially a handbook of strategies for the church today. And I just started reading it. And, you know, one of the things that I was really impressed by in this book is how important it is to work together in the community with different agencies, law enforcement, counselors, the
Right.
church, you know, neighborhood community groups, all of that, that we can't do it on our own. You know, I think sometimes there's a savior complex inside each one of us, that we want to be the one to help rescue. And just reading some of the stories in this book, that can really lead to actually more damaging results.
Amen.
And so it's so important to connect
Yes.
with these agencies that are trained. And that's one of the things, I mean, I have a ton of questions for Congressman Owens that I didn't get to ask, but one of the things, the bills that he co-sponsored, I believe, was on training law enforcement and other agencies with human trafficking, just to continue to raise awareness. And I think that's so important.
You can tell his heart is just so big. And he
Mhm.
grew up in a time where there's no excuse, no victim. And I think that carries through in his spirit and what he was saying about, you know, all of us. If all of us were just to stay in our lane and to continue to move forward instead of being all up in everybody's business, we would probably get a lot done. And because we'd be edifying each other. And I love that you went from writing about the Nephilim to actually experiencing somebody that, was around the Nephilim host. Like you got to see it face to face.
Mhm.
But I know for a fact that when we open ourselves up through good intention, through love, through
Mhm.
like actually following what God's telling us to do,
Mhm.
it can't help but, have
Mhm.
incredible things happen. I'm wearing my Bochi's Place hat because we just this last Thursday had the big white gala. She calls it the white gala. Everybody wears white. It's this symbol of purity and these girls starting over again. And the stories that she shared, and she showed a film where it was basically doing what you were saying, where this is a girl who falls for some guy who happens to be shady, involved, but he's in her high school or her, whatever. And so
Mhm.
she's so crazy about him that she's doing whatever he tells her to do. And next thing you know, he
Mhm.
turns on her and drugs her and then forces her into trafficking. And every single time, every story that we've heard, that's what it is. And there's the woman who is one of the women. There's a lot that I work there that have graduated, but one of them in particular, her story I want to share because she grew up in the most she neighborhood in Dallas, suburbs, right?
Mhm.
And you'd think, okay, she has a mom, she has a dad, the whole bit. This girl was groomed for 2 years by a man who bought her things, did things for her, and then he gets her to go to New York City,
Mhm.
and then boom, she's trafficked.
Wow.
And she was in it for a decade. And it took everything because what happens is when these girls finally get the courage to leave, they know that they know where their families are. They know they're scared to death. They're
Mhm.
drugged out most of the time, but they have to leave with nothing. They literally have to leave with nothing and just go on pure faith that God will get them there. But you know what? That lady was smiling ear to ear. She looked
Mhm.
stunning. She was, in charge of a lot of what happened that night. And it just was so, I mean, full redemption. She's written her book, the whole bit.
Mhm.
And so, really, if we all can just come together, it isn't as burdensome as it is if just one or two people are doing it. So I'm glad that you answered the call because there's a lot of psychologists that still don't know what this is, right?
Right, right. Yeah. And I liked that you tried to bring in the overlap between trafficking and satanic ritual abuse. I'm not sure that he quite got what you were saying, but it's so true that there is this overlap. And I think that's another piece of awareness that we need to bring to our communities is that not only do we have this human trafficking, but we also have satanic ritual abuse that's very active in our communities. And that's really difficult for people to swallow.
Yeah, because it's so unbelievable. Like
Mhm.
you're like, what? Someone eating a
Mhm.
person, like what in the world? I'm picky about having certain foods, let alone talk,
Right.
right? And it's a whole nother level of evil, which is really basically what a politician who is good would be fighting for. And I was happy to hear that he was with the sheriffs because I do know that a
Mhm.
lot of the sheriffs are good people, but I
Mhm.
also know that there's a lot of regulating through like the end around with the one that you were talking about, where they don't vote on it. They regulate it in
Right.
through the CPS or through the educational systems or through the medical boards rather than something that they're voting on. And so this is a big deal too. If
Yeah.
you were a congresswoman, Congresswoman Sanger, I think maybe you should take over when he's done. What are the things that you would focus on? Like I resonated so much with him because it was a sincere question. The scope is so big.
Yeah.
you'd have to know so much. I don't even know how they could study enough to vote properly. I know
Right.
that that's what he was saying. He relies on his team a lot. But what would your thing be? What would be your thing?
Well, it's interesting you asked that, because one of the questions I wanted to ask him is, why did he vote in favor of the Respect Marriage Act? Because I think for me, some of the most pressing issues that I see is the protection of marriage and family, and
Mhm.
then also the education system. And so, you know, just like you were saying, and I think he acknowledged, is that it's just so difficult to read every single bill, especially when they make the bills 1,000 pages. It's just, who
And they
can do
hide and
that?
layer other things
Right.
in there.
They
Yep.
hired late. Yeah. And so, I'm part of all these different groups here in the Salt Lake Valley. And, some of my friends that, were part of these freedom fighting groups, we don't want indoctrination of our kids in schools. We're
Mhm.
fighting for health freedom. We're fighting for the integrity of the election system, all of that. And so my friends, they are very astute, politically minded people. And we were all really shocked by his vote in favor of this Respect for Marriage Act. So I wanted to ask him just to explain why he did, because I don't know if he really understood the nuances of how this plays out, because
Share with us what it actually is about, and then how you see it playing out. And I will share it with him.
yeah, I can actually, I have a letter that he sent to one of his constituents that asked, why did you vote in favor for? So maybe I'll just read his response to be fair to his perspective, so people know, at least in written form, what he said. He said, as you may know, the Respect for Marriage Act was introduced on July 18th, 2022 by Rep. Gerald Nadler. As is already required under the full faith and credit clause of the U.S. Constitution, this bill requires states to honor lawful marriages in other states, regardless of race, sex, ethnicity, or national origin. As a conservative, my first questions when I learned of this bill were: one, how does it affect religious liberties? Two, does it violate states' rights? After speaking with spiritual leaders of various denominations and faiths, as well as both past and present state attorney generals, I concluded that the answer to these questions was no. To be clear, the Respect for Marriage Act does not create any new rights or protections. It also does not tread on religious liberty, nor will it require churches or religious organizations to perform same-sex marriages ceremonies. Furthermore, the legislation aligns with existing Utah state law. And he also said that he voted yes because he wanted to stand against marriage discrimination based on factors beyond sex, such as race or ethnicity. And, for him, having grown up in the South where there was segregation, he remembers stories of Black men being persecuted and actually killed based on their interactions with white women. And so I can appreciate his perspective, with regard to that. But some of the concerns is that, this Respect for Marriage Act, it actually, it means that if a state, for example, let's say California, were to pass a law and legalize marriage between an adult and a child, then other states would have to recognize that. So if that couple, that adult and child, were to move to Utah, for example, Utah would have to recognize that that couple is legally married. Okay,
I
that is a
see. Slow. Scary.
huge issue, because
Yeah.
that is child trafficking. And so
Yeah.
if one state, and we know there are some crazy states out there, if one state passes it,
California just passed the deal where they can keep your kid for a gender change if
right?
it's already there, and or they can help them with one even if the parents are not there.
Yes. Yeah,
Mind blowing.
totally. And so not only do you have that, but you might have a state like Utah, for example, that decides to legalize polygamy. I mean, I have polygamists that live just miles from my house. I mean, everyone here in Utah knows that polygamy still exists. So would we as a state legalize polygamy? If we did, then other states would have to recognize that as legally married. And so for me, you know, back to your question, what would I do? First of all, I would never want to be a congresswoman.
Yeah, but he really did tell me that he would never do that. And it's funny
Right.
because a year after I met him, that's what he was doing.
Yeah, God has a funny way, doesn't he, of leading us in things. But I think for me, it, you know, this Respect for Marriage Act is the exact opposite of what it says. It's not respecting marriage. And first of all, recognizing that marriage it's a covenant that was established by God between one man and one woman. And so I believe that these laws and decrees that God has set forth supersede any law of the land, any law of government. And it actually, to his point, it actually transcends race, because the marriage covenant between a man and a woman is for all of humanity, right, irrespective of race. And so I think some of my concern and some of his constituents were concerned that he voted in favor for. And actually there are I think it was a few weeks ago, there are 2,000 pastors, you know, ministers of faith communities, or even, you know, Christian leaders of nonprofit organizations. They sent a letter to every US senator urging them not to vote in favor of this Respect for Marriage Act, because it could require ordained ministers who would marry someone to marry, you know, a couple or a throuple or a child and an adult, or you know, on and on and on it can go. And that goes counter to their belief that a marriage covenant is between a man and a woman. And so there could be legal repercussions. And so there are really a lot of very concerned, rightfully so, Christian leaders and ministers that are trying to raise awareness. And I wonder if Congressman Owens was aware of this.
That piece of it, yeah. Great question. I don't know.
Yeah.
I will ask him. And the wonderful thing about him is he's so accessible. You know, he was my friend before. He and I worked on some stuff with guys out of prison. And Mac, the kid that I took in, and Burgess had been lined up together to speak at the same event in Utah, and that's how we met him. And so he's just been absolutely wonderful as, you know, someone to work with in the charity world, just upstanding and giving it all. When that man says he works and he gives it his all, it doesn't matter if it's on the football field or, you know, if it's in Congress. And that's one thing that I really do appreciate about him. And I also think that it must take this incredible ability to be able to let go, because I would feel like, just watching it from outside, that it would feel very defeating, especially in today's environment and the way that it's going right now, as he would call the very far left, the deep swamp, or whatever it is that is in control right now. Because really, it does, like he said too, it comes down to us as a team fighting Satan. And what does Satan love to do? He likes to eat, you know, whatever he can. And, you know, marriages, he's trying to destroy the bond between mothers and children, fathers and children, children and their siblings, teachers and children, making people feel lonely. You know, I've never seen more people truly feeling alone and isolated, suicides up crazy, like you were saying, or I think he was saying about the fentanyl. It was him. You know, drugs gone off the charts. Girls like me, who I was a crazy tomboy. Now, don't get me wrong, I had a boyfriend since kindergarten, but I was a tomboy. Like, I wanted to be a boy, but I also loved them, you know? And so, you know, these are things that kids grow out of, and it's being gosh, I guess just it's literally it's all of those things on the altar at the same time. And he's going after them big time, and we have to do something. And it's just whatever in your lane, you know?
Right.
If you only have time to do one thing, do it. You know, one thing that I loved watching at Bochi's place was there was someone like me who wants to go there, wants to work on the front lines, wants to get the information out, tell everybody. And I have a really rich friend who couldn't go. And so he gave me his money, and I went and spent his money. And so that was really fun too, you know, because then he felt satisfied that he was doing something good with, you know, the money he's worked really hard for. And then I was able to, you know, be the person that could show up and buy all of the things. All of the things that I don't even need.
Right, right. Well, I think one of the things, to your point, I really appreciate about Congressman Owens is that he still has hope. He has hope that we can turn this around, and he's very optimistic. And I feel like you need to have that in the position that he's in. And, you know, I pray for him. I pray that God would position him in such a way that his voice is heard, and that these things that are on his heart, like these anti-trafficking legislation, would actually get out of committee and be voted on and move towards becoming a law. You know, it's hard, like he was saying, being in the minority party, that is, that, you know, it's hard to move these bills through. But, you know, just in looking at some of these legislation, you know, that he's trying to get passed, I just really commend him for the work that he's doing.
Yeah. Well, that's good. And it's so wonderful to see someone like you that actually understands what's going on in their state. And for anybody that's watching, I mean, that really is a good way to help, to know what's going on in your own state, as if you're the one that has to report it, or as if you're the one that's interviewing your congressman. Because if you do, then you can share that with people you know. And then we do have awareness, and we're able to move things forward. I also, though, I think sometimes you should take a page from the playbook of your opponent, and you don't necessarily always have to take the route that you think you have to take. There's a lot of people that are going around the old guard in new and different ways. And so, you know, we can start our own associations. We can start our own you know, charities, or, you know, be the light force, you know, get out there and do the things. But yes, I think that you should run for Congress now.
Oh, geez, Carmen.
You're just the kind of person.
You better watch it.
Somebody I trust, and somebody that researches and knows her stuff. And you're definitely fearless. So those are all good things. All good things. And so before we get going, because we're almost at the hour, tell everyone what you're working on No Longer Enslaved. I know you're on like episode 20 or something. I've been keeping up.
Thank you. Yes, I'm in the midst of my 7-part series on spiritual mapping, so transformation through spiritual mapping. And I have to say, I have gotten such good feedback from the interview you and I did when I talked about the spiritual mapping we did at Riverton High School. It has ignited people across the nation. So I'm so thrilled by that. And I really have this sense of urgency to get this series done that I'm working on, the spiritual mapping, to equip people as best as I can. And I've been sharing the mistakes that I've made and we've made as a team. So there's more that I'll share because I just want other people to learn from our mistakes. Absolutely. And not walk down the same path. I mean, no reason people should come under unnecessary spiritual attack. Learn from what we've done wrong. And so I'm really thankful for that opportunity. I'm also working on narrating my book. So I'm on chapter 11. So I'm about halfway, not quite yet. My publisher and I are going to put it in audiobook format, just because so many people have asked for that.
I'll actually read it. Or listen to it. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So I'm working hard on that as well. And then I can't say what spiritual mapping assignment we're doing because you don't want to tell the enemy what you're doing, but I am involved in a very intense spiritual mapping project here in the Salt Lake Valley. So
Hey, I know, I was thinking it would be really cool for you to work with Burgess or some of the sheriffs, or
mhm.
there's so much out there that could benefit from that concept. But yeah, it's good that you collapse the bell curve for people. We definitely don't want people learning the hard way. And
Right.
that's what I share with, charities. When once you've done something, some of the pitfalls, and
Mhm,
you don't want everybody to have to go through that. And
mhm,
and that's where, Madison and I have talked about this a lot, because people think taking somebody in is just feeding another person. Yeah, that's true if it's a normal adoption or a normal,
mhm,
somebody that's down on their luck. But this isn't what that is. As you know, as a
mhm,
psychologist, it's very complex, very layered. It has, therapeutic angles, it has drug angles, it has
mhm,
emotional trauma. There's just so many layers. And I think sometimes people don't realize that you want the people to rest and recover, but you don't want to spoil them. And it's so easy to take on other people's burdens, but you're actually becoming that rescuer. And you don't want to rescue, you want God to.
right,
You want
right.
God to
Mhm,
work with them and rescue them.
mhm,
And that's why I like the mapping concept, because you're allowing for fertile ground,
mhm, mhm. Exactly. Yeah.
changing the whole thing. Well, tell people where they can find you, cutie.
They can best find me at nolongerenslaved.com. And then I'm on YouTube. My channel is No Longer Enslaved, same on Rumble. I also have a Telegram channel called Laura Sanger 444 Hertz.
Sounds good. And thank you so much for coming on the weekend. And
Yes,
I'm
thank you
so
for
glad I
having
got to
me.
connect the two of you. And I'll be sure to make sure that I email both of you so you'll have his
Perfect.
information. All right.
Perfect.
Thanks everyone for being here. Have a wonderful weekend. Happy Saturday. Bye.